Good afternoon and welcome to this special edition of Open Line. I'm your host, Chisenga Mumba. As you've seen from our caption, the special topic of discussion is the U.S. elections. As you all know, we're in the aftermath and there's a lot of expectations, so we'll be exploring various issues. Now, the incumbent Barack Obama, this news to a lot of you, has headed back to the White House for his last 4 terms of his office. And this has been one of the most tightly contested presidential races in the history of the USA, as evidenced by the results, with Obama sweeping an advantage over his challenger, Mitt Romney, particularly on issues such as health. Now, during the second round of the presidential debates hosted by CNN, the two candidates were steered especially to debate on the U.S. foreign policy. Apart from, well, debatably getting back at the terrorists that killed Americans in Benghazi, what other policies has Obama got under his sleeve for Africa? These are the issues, like I said, that we'll be exploring during the course of the afternoon. My guests this afternoon, on my immediate left, I'm joined by Steve Schwartz, Deputy Chief of Mission. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us.
Okay. We're also joined by Rob Romanowski, Consul. Welcome.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Okay. And last but not least, we're so happy to have a lady, Ayana Angulo, USAID Contracting Officer. Welcome to Open Line.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Okay. So maybe an overview of what happened in these elections to start out with, Steve.
Well, thank you, Chisenga. This week, the American people affirmed, I think, continuity in government in the U.S., that they looked at all the members of Congress, a third of the members of the Senate, and the President and Vice President of the United States, and essentially voted for continuity. They re-elected President Obama and Vice President Biden. In the popular vote, I think they were up by 1 or 2%, which is substantial, and they had a clear majority in the Electoral College, which is what actually elects the American president. In the Senate, the Democrats picked up, I believe, 2 seats, which is essentially about the same as they had. They will retain a majority in the U.S. Senate. The Republicans will maintain a strong majority in the House of Representatives, which gives us at least 2 more years of divided government, and it's going to, in a sense, perpetuate the challenge to both parties and to both parts of government to try to work together to overcome some of our bigger problems.
Okay. It did seem like a really narrow win, though, wouldn't you say?
It seems like a narrow win because you're sort of looking at it state by state as it unfolds, but at the end he won by about 100 electoral votes, which in our system is a fairly large victory, even though in the popular vote it was much narrower.
Okay, absolutely. Now, you did mention the Electoral College. Perhaps, Rob, you'd like to enlighten us on what that is and how it works.
Sure. Thank you. The Electoral College is often misunderstood as thinking maybe it's not true to democratic principles, but actually it does have many advantages, many democratic advantages. It's an old system that was started in our Constitution over 225 years ago. And basically, there's, not to get too technical, but there's 538 electors. And those aren't necessarily politicians. Those are elected by states. And each state has a certain number of representatives. And that's based on the population of the states and number of senators. And the reason behind the Electoral College process is, as you know, the United States is a very large country, and we have lots of different regions. And instead of having a direct popular vote system, this requires candidates to campaign and address issues that are regional issues. So instead of simply going to areas where there's high population, a candidate has to address issues within the interior of the country, within the north, the south, the west, the Midwest. They have to address issues that are concerned to those to the region. So therefore, it enables during the course of the campaign for candidates to achieve a broad consensus among the electorate. So while it may appear that it's not truly democratic, it's very unusual that a candidate will win the Electoral College and not win the popular vote. It does happen, but generally those trends go together. So if you're winning in the national polls, you generally are also carrying the state polls. But it makes sure that, and one other thing, if I may, when there are problems in the electoral system, they're limited to states. So if there was a problem in the election system nationally, then you'd have a concern about the whole election system nationally. But this way it's limited to a state, and that way it's more easily resolved.
So you do get a picture of how well you're doing prior to the actual elections, prior to people going into the vote.
That's true.
Okay.
You do get a system, but I think the primary thing is that the entire United States, whether you're in a rural area of a low population or you're on the seaboard, on the coast, that the candidates have to hear your concerns, and they have to explain their policies that are local policies, explain issues that concern to you. So I think in many ways it's very democratic. And
how long have you been using the electoral college system?
Since our Constitution, which is the oldest constitution in the world, so 225 years.
Right.
So it's worked. It's not perfect, but it's worked so far, and I think it will continue to be used, and it affirms our values.
Okay. Now, a lot of us stayed awake for at least a couple of hours to monitor the U.S. elections, to hear the results, the final result, and all of that. Would you say that you're happy with the result, and would you describe the general feeling of the American people, not just those that are living outside of the U.S., but those who are actually in the U.S. right now?
Well, I think that I am personally happy with the result, but I'm happier with the process. And so when I say result, I really mean I'm happy that lots of people got out to vote. I'm happy that everybody's vote was counted, that we didn't have any post-election dramatic problems. I noticed that I was personally encouraged that many of my Facebook friends who are in the U.S. Posted about how they were volunteering to take elderly people in California and Indiana. And so there was a broad, it seems like there was broad participation by youth, by African Americans, Hispanics, and women. And so that the whole process and the outcome of the process actually makes me happy.
Okay. In a little while, we'll be hearing from Mr. Mlenga, who actually works in the U.S., and he'll be giving us some insight as to what exactly is going on in the United States right now. We imagine that people are still on tenterhooks. They want to hear the post-election statements, and they'll be going on for some time. So maybe, Steve, you can enlighten us on what this the re-election of President Obama should imply for Africa. Why should Africans be excited about this particular development?
Well, I think President Obama has been very good for Africa. I think he's paid a lot of attention to the continent, to issues on the continent, and he recently issued what we call a policy directive, affirming a broad U.S. strategy towards Africa, laying out policy priorities. The principal priorities that he wants to advance are strengthening democratic institutions and fostering broad-based economic growth, trade, and development. We have, for example, a trade mission led by our Department of Commerce coming here at the end of November. It's the first U.S. government-led trade delegation to Zambia ever, and it's symbolic of President Obama's effort to try to strengthen investments and strengthen trade. He'll continue to support the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which allows duty-free entry of African goods into the United States, and it's something that Zambia knows very well, having hosted the AGOA Forum here 2 years ago, and which increasingly it's taking advantage of. Our trade with Zambia has doubled this year over last year, and the year before over the previous year. So we're looking at steady growth in trade. We just had Pack Expo. It's a big trade fair in the United States for packaging goods. 54 Zambians paid themselves to go to this exhibition to see about how to do business with these U.S. firms. It turned out to be the largest national delegation at the entire fair, those from Zambia. So I think it's indicative of a real growing economic tie between our countries, and certainly something in line with what President Obama wants to foster.
Okay. I did say in my preamble the fact that Obama wants to ensure the security of U.S. citizens, obviously across the world. Perhaps you'd like to talk about the African situation, what your core interests are in the Sub-Saharan region, for example, where we are.
Thank you. I think our core interests in Sub-Saharan Africa are similar to those all over the world. You mentioned protecting U.S. interests and U.S. citizens, and that'll be our #1 goal anywhere in the world. I think promoting jobs in the U.S. and economic growth around the world is also something that we're pushing, and it's a centerpiece of our policy with Africa. On security, I mean, you mentioned, I think, Benghazi. Certainly we're looking at security of our own embassies, our people, but also working with African governments to build security cooperation, capabilities, capacity building all over the world. For example, here in Zambia, we don't provide the principal protection for the U.S. Embassy or for American citizens. That's done by Zambian law enforcement.
People, right.
And we absolutely want them to be as good at that as they can be. And then strengthening democratic institutions. When President Obama spoke in Ghana in 2009, he said that Africa doesn't need more strong men, it needs strong institutions. And yesterday we had a celebration really at the ambassador's residence where we saw the final returns from the U.S. election, and we heard at least President Obama's speech. Ambassador Storella spoke, and Justice Mama Lima was there as our guest of honor.
Fantastic.
And she talked a bit, it was great, and she spoke a bit about the election here last year, which was a great example of democracy in action.
It was.
And it had the same sorts of features where the people made a decision, it was assessed and announced fairly, where the sitting president conceded and the new president took power.
You don't see that in a lot of African countries, do you?
You don't?
We're very proud citizens, actually.
You should be, and we hope all of Africans see Zambia as a model, as something to emulate. It happened here, it happened peacefully, and it's something that can and should happen all over the continent.
Okay. He has talked about the economic factor, the economic growth. Perhaps you'd like to zoom in on specific developmental projects, maybe Ayana as well, if you'd like to come in on that and just elaborate on what exactly we can expect.
Well, on economic and development projects, I will probably defer to my colleague. She has better spoken on those issues. So.
Thank you, Rob. I'll try.
Okay.
So, with respect to economic growth and our policies here in Sub-Saharan Africa, I know here in the mission we're investing over $400 million toward the strengthening of Zambia's institutions to help promote economic growth, to help strengthen the health systems here, because obviously we need healthy citizens to help contribute to a healthy economy, and to also improve the educational attainment or achievement of students here in Zambia. So these are priorities that have existed before this election, and they'll continue to exist now.
Okay. All right. Rob, would you like to elaborate on the specific aspects that you are looking forward to as a consul?
As a consul? Well, as a consul...
Would you like to hold that thought before you start? I do believe that Mlenga is finally on the line. Hello, Mlenga. Good afternoon. Well, good afternoon for us anyway. Mlenga, are you there? Hello, Mlenga.
Hello.
Okay. Mlenga, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, we can hear you now. Is it good morning for you? Hello, Mlenga.
Yeah, good morning.
Okay, please go ahead with your analysis. You can give us an overview of what's going on right now in the United States.
Well, I think the elections are over. And I think the nation is getting back to doing business as usual. The campaign itself, I think most of us who studied the Obama machine in 2008, we knew a long time ago that Mr. Obama is going to win. Why? Because just like in Zambia, I think the elections are won at the grassroots. And in 2008, Mr. Obama had built a very, very good ground machine, which Mr. Romney, I think, failed to emulate. And as a result, we knew as early as, just when the campaign started in full swing, Mr. Obama had a superior ground machine. And I think even up to today, most of the Republicans, that's the party to which Mr. Romney belongs, admit that Mr. Obama's machine was very well built, and Mr. Romney's was, and I'm going to quote one of the editors at the Red State, who says, there was just a really good ground game for Barack Obama and a lot of smoke and mirrors from Tim Romney. So we knew as early as 2010, Mr. Obama's advisors, the guys who had run the campaign in 2008, left the White House mysteriously. What they did was they started packaging Mr. Romney, that people to watch his mouth, everything that he said, everything that he did, and as a result, you had the 47% comment, which somebody had taped there while he was in Florida. So from early on, the Obama campaign had started running their campaign compared to Mr. Romney, who just started in about 18, 20 months ago.
Okay. Mlenga, would you give us a feel of how it is that Zambian nationals, as well as other African nationals, are feeling about the outcome of the result? I know you say we're getting back to business as usual, but perhaps you can give us an overview of the feelings there.
Well, I don't know how much race has to do with that, but I think almost all the African nationals, almost all the Zambians who are in the United States, I think they all supported Mr. Obama. And there's a reason why. Let's make the assumption that the race is not one of them. If you look at the two candidates, Mr. Romney failed to show or to impact middle-class people. He would try to bet $10,000 at the sport, and when most people don't have $10,000 in their account. While Mr. Obama was very empathetic, I mean, he appears that he cares and he feels for the people, that he is one of them. And that was a very big issue. And that you can see the reflection in the results. Mr. Romney didn't have women's votes. He didn't have young people's votes and students' votes. He didn't have the Hispanics. And these are, although we're talking about black people, but they're part of these hugely defined groups. For instance, women and healthcare. Mr. Obama has very good programs under Obamacare to take care of women and the middle class people. Mr. Romney failed to prove that he can take care of the middle class. Also, the issue of immigration and Hispanics. Hispanics are about 36% of the population now. So really, he thought to pay attention to that, whereas at least the Hispanics and their immigration problems can be solved if Mr. Obama is president, and that's why he got 72% of the Hispanic vote compared to only about 20% for Mr. Romney.
Okay. Mlenga, let's talk about the process itself. Would you say that there are lessons there for the democratic process of elections in Africa?
First and foremost, I think the American electoral system is different from most democratic systems in Africa.
Sure.
Number one, here in the United States, it's possible for a candidate in the popular vote. Say if you go back to 2000, Al Gore won the popular vote by almost a million votes, but he lost the presidency based on the electoral college system. What that college system does is the states are allocated votes based on the population. For instance, California is the biggest state. It has about 35 million people, which is about 10% of the American population. So they have the highest electoral votes. And if you look at the map for Mr. Romney, he won a lot of states, but those states are not heavily populated. So they had very low electoral votes. And I got calls from all over the world, from friends in South Africa, in England, in China. They were worried when the results started coming in, because the East Coast, the election 3 hours before the West Coast, and in the East, that's where you find a lot of these Republican states. As this began moving westward, then the big democratic steps begin to kick in. So compared to the African elections, I think that, number one, they're both democratic, but there's a big difference in how the outcome is decided. So this time, Mr. Obama won both the electoral college vote as well as the popular vote.
Okay. Malanga, thank you so much for calling us.
Sure, you're welcome anytime, please. You can reach me. I think I provided my email. And
yes, absolutely. We have your details. We'll be calling on you from time to time. Thank you so much. So that was Malanga coming all the way from the United States. Would you like to maybe react to some of the issues that you brought
I think
out?
I heard Malanga say that he thought it was clear that President Obama would win, and it was clear.
He sounded so biased.
Going back to 2010, and
yes.
I don't think it was that clear. I think as recently as about 1 month ago, when the first presidential debate took place, that really resulted in a rise in support for Mitt Romney. To the point I think he actually was favored in the polls for a week or two. And then President Obama and his team, managed to, I think, convey a stronger image to the public over the final month of the campaign. But even right there towards the end, it was very close. And
it was. I don't
think President Obama was sure he was going to win a month ago, but in the end he did.
Okay. Rob, would you like to share your reactions to some of what Malanga said? And maybe you could also enlighten us on what changes we can expect now that the elections are over and done with. Are we getting down to business, right back to business as usual?
Well, let me talk first on the changes. As you know, it was a long campaign. It was a long election, but it was also very substantive. I mean, there was a lot of issues that were significant, important, as was illustrated in the debates. So I think now that President Obama is reelected, a lot of the things that he campaigned on and a lot of things that he governed in the last 4 years will be solidified. Those programs and achievements that he's had will continue to move forward on that path. As it would have been much different if the Republican candidate, Governor Romney, had won. There would have been more significant, there would be less continuity than there will be now. But also, which is interesting to remark on the election, not only was it a presidential election, but there was also lots of senatorial candidates and representative candidates, as well as, I don't know if you've heard, but we have referendums. States will have referendums, which is a vote on a particular issue that's specific to the state. And if you look across the United States, there are some broad trends that are emerging that have been different that you've seen in history. For example, legalization of same-sex marriages was approved in a number of states. Of course, there's still not a national consensus on it, but the general trend seems to be continuing that direction. Also, another thing that got a lot of attention was the legalization of marijuana. Now that was a proposal in Colorado, one of our states, and they will still have some challenges because they'll still have to sort out our federal law and the state law. But it does give you a sense of the different issues that are all over the United States. And one of the changes that I will agree with Mr. Malanga had pointed out was the energy and the different groups that participated in the election. Right. I believe there was, of the total number of voters, 53% were women. And so there was an increase of women voters, partly I would assume because women issues were prominent in the campaign as well. So you had a number, more turnout of women voters, of minorities, and so those things will continue that trajectory, and it's a good thing, of course, because as our country, United States, is very diverse, but as it continues to be a diverse country through immigration and just through our normal population, those different segments of our society will continue to make their interests known and participate in our electorate. So.
Okay. Ayana, would you like to comment, especially with regard to the 53% women voters? I think that's truly remarkable, especially for us in Africa. I think we're still struggling in that direction. Would you like to comment on that? What gave us this drive, the youth, the women, to participate in the vote?
Right. I think that women and youth alike basically realize how important it is for them to have to exercise their right to vote. So if you have some issues that are important to you, like reproductive health, women's rights, the economy, there are a lot of youth that are graduating from college soon that, you know, will be looking for jobs. And so I think that it just the issues that maybe in the past weren't something that youth or many women paid attention to, these are actually issues that people could feel like it was really touching them. So that is probably the major reason that, you know, more women came out and more youth came out. Also, I think the campaigns also did a lot of reaching out to youth. I know that there are a lot of campaign activities going on U.S. colleges and university campuses as well.
Okay, so the youth are actually part of the campaigning process and not just voting.
Right. I imagine that this has been a trend that happened even before this election.